Welcome to the Green Woman Podcast. I am your host, Joyce Wheeler. Please show some love and visit thegreenwomanstore.com for products provided by women for women. My guest today is Stasha, and Stasha has spent 20 years searching for a way to relieve her endometritis, and in the process discovered how to help women balance their hormones through both science and woo. Knowing this, she could no longer keep quiet, becoming a speaker and using her voice ever since to bring relief to women worldwide. Stasha is known as the period coach. A certified holistic health coach, her life vision is to reconnect women to the power in their cycles and end the taboo of menstruation. So, no big deal. Stasha is changing the conversation around periods from whispers in the ladies' room to empowered public discussions. Welcome to the show, Stasha.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. And I forgot to mention the date. Today is Thursday, August 2nd, 2018. So tell us a little bit about your story, your background.
Oh, yeah. So I had probably some of the worst periods in high school that you can have. Endometriosis, well, I haven't officially been diagnosed because that takes a surgery. My mother had it, my aunt had it. It's handed down through the matriarchal line, and we had very similar symptoms. So I think it's a pretty safe bet, and it's very, very painful. There have been women who have actually died from not going to the hospital when an appendix burst because it wasn't as bad as their period cramps, because
Wow.
endometriosis is that painful. So I actually passed out most months, usually right before I would get my period. It would just hit me like a ton of bricks, and I would just pass out from the just flood of pain hitting my body. So it's not fun, and it's really actually very embarrassing. And it took me it took me about 10, 15 years to realize that my embarrassment about this is not, I shouldn't be embarrassed about this. I should be demanding help and answers. And the fact that there are none is actually something that we as a culture should be more ashamed of than me being passing out. But when you're a teenager and you're trying to just survive, those taboos are really bad to break in public spaces. So I spent a long time trying to fix it, and was on birth control and was on narcotics, trying to manage the pain in high school, and neither worked. And I was on birth control that had been recalled because of the just amount of women who died from it. Not that women don't die from birth control in general. It's actually one of the side effects to all birth controls. So it's not fun, and it's certainly not the only answer. And in trying to figure it out, I realized just how much harm the taboo around women and menstruation does to our whole world. The medical community doesn't really have anything to do with it, and women are given misinformation, disinformation, and not educated. And I just realized how much harm it was really doing. Is actually leaving women in pain, leaving women without answers, leaving some women dead, and it's unacceptable anymore. So I've made it my life's mission to deprogram our attitudes and cultural conditioning around menstruation, and start educating women and sharing with them that there are actually answers out there, and that they're different for every woman, but we can figure it out, and they don't have to be miserable, horrible events or inconvenient even. They can actually be a very powerful tool that we have as a woman when we stop trying to run away from our womanhood, so to speak, and start running towards it.
So when you were passing out in public?
I definitely passed out in the shower a few times, which is private and preferable, but I passed out in school in front of my locker a few times. I came home all through my 20s working in New York City. I would be on the subway, and I have about three different, very distinct memories of being on the train, clinging to consciousness, just being like, you cannot passed out in a subway that is, first of all, disgusting, but second of all, you're completely defenseless.
Right.
And that's terribly dangerous. So I have a couple moments of, I just very distinctly remember one sitting in a seat holding on to the cool railing, hoping that cold would keep me awake, and another one of standing next in rush hour, just cram-packed into a subway car with holding onto the pole and just being like, do not lose consciousness, do not lose consciousness, do not lose consciousness. So get home. Once you get home, you can collapse. Just get home, get home, get home. And just fighting through that pain and that lack of, my whole body is desperately wanting to shut down, go offline, get out of here. And having to stay aware and in it. And, yeah, it's not fun, and it's hard. It's hard to explain to people what's going on because you're not allowed to talk about it. So, as a teenager, somebody would be like, oh my God, what's wrong with you? And you'd be like, oh, I just got my period. And in the 90s, they would turn and look at you and go, oh, TMI, disgusting. And as an adult, you kind of got the same reaction. I mean, 20s, working in New York City, you still get that reaction. Now you're just adults, and it's a little less, I guess, Valley Girl sounding, but still the general reaction is, okay, that's gross. I didn't need to know that. And you're like, well, you asked.
Right.
Do you want me to lie?
Right, right,
you
exactly.
Feel better about the situation?
Right. And it's something too for you to have to be embarrassing during your teen years for something that is natural and that's something you have no control over.
Right.
What are you supposed to do? Say stop?
Right. And you're put in this position where you have to not only protect yourself, but you now, even more important, is to protect the delicate sensibilities of the people around you. So I learned fairly quickly that actually saying, oh no, I'm really sick because I have my period, or I'm throwing up because I have my period, or I just passed out because of my period, was unacceptable. And I learned very early to say food poisoning, or I must have a flu, or,
Wow.
The stomach flu is going around. And it took me until my late 20s to realize I can't believe that not only am I suffering like this, but I also have to smile and act like it's something else to protect the sensibility of the people around me. And that was just as damaging to my own healing process as the actual healing process, just having to be in that position of lying to protect people or saving myself from that embarrassment or shame. And at some point I just had to, you can't really stop yourself from feeling embarrassed in the moment, but you do at some point just go, you know what? I don't care. This is what's happening, and it's not my fault, and it's okay, and I'm trying to fix it. And in the meantime, I could use some love and compassion.
Right, exactly. And it's funny that you wouldn't get that from another female who knows what it's like to go through that monthly cycle. Of course, it is different for all of us.
Yeah, some women have never experienced any kind of discomfort or pain, and they have no idea. Some women just don't want to admit it's happening to them as well. We are very, very conditioned by our culture, and our culture puts very high on a shelf that this is absolutely disgusting and not to be talked about. So it's very hard to overcome, even for women who want to have the conversation.
So when we had talked previously, you had mentioned that there were times that you would throw up and actually end up passing out on the bathroom floor.
Yeah, that was pretty much every month.
Wow.
The couple of days before my cycle, I would have very, very drastic mood swings. I would feel very just depressed and angry, and it was hard to, and I knew it wasn't really me. I knew it felt very out of body, like I was kind of floating above it, watching these emotions happen and going, that's just unnecessary. This is terrible overreaction right now. And I think I'm fortunate in that I mostly was able to keep it to myself and just scream and cry and rage in the privacy of my own home or my own bedroom.
That's sad. That's sad that you had to do that on your own.
But it was hard, yes, and it was very, having to shove things down until I had some private time, which is very hard and not good for you. And I recognized that something was wrong. And then and then I would get a hot flash, and I would break out into a cold sweat, and I would realize that was the instant I'm going to get my period. I could go to the bathroom, and immediately that was it. I would have my period, and I generally would break out that cold sweat and pass out, and from there I would wake up. When I got a little bit older, I could generally hold it together long enough to make it to the bathroom. And then I very much, the first 2 to 3 days of my period, as soon as the blood started, I would just start throwing up. And it was very much like having food poisoning, where it just, your whole body is evacuating everything. And it's uncomfortable, and you're miserable, and you just want it to end, except that unlike food poisoning that usually ends in about 8 to 12 hours, this went on for 2 to 3 days.
Oh,
and
geez.
At some point, I would just be so physically wrecked that I would just pass out on the floor of the bathroom. And I'm fortunate that I lived with very amazing roommates who would bring pillows and tea and blankets in and just leave me there, or help me to the couch when I got to a point that I could leave the bathroom. But yeah, it was not pleasant. I don't wish it upon anyone. It was terrible.
Are you familiar with the way that the tribal people of America dealt with that?
No.
They actually, when women are together, they share that vibrational frequency, and they tend to menstruate at the same time. They would set up a tent for the women who were going through their cycle, and then the elder women and the children would wait on these females until they were done with their cycle. It was actually the men revered the women because they found it so amazing that they could bleed and not die.
Yes, I'm very familiar with the red tents and moon lodges. I thought you were speaking about how they dealt with that particular condition. That I don't know the answer to. I don't know if there was endometriosis in the before technological advancements and dietary changes happened to us at all. I'd actually be very curious to know if that was, if those extreme kind of things happened to women before we started such processed foods and contamination of the environment.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the red tents. I'm a big fan of the circles and moon lodges and moon huts and all of the various forms that they took in the cultures around the world. And I do truly believe that part of our hormonal imbalances, the pain, the mood swings, everything, just from the little things to the big, are a part of that disconnection from our circles that we used to have once upon a time. And yeah, one of the things that I love teaching my clients and my women is that that moon time, as you described, in those tents and those lodges, those women were expected to come back to the community, to their tribe, to their families with messages, divine downloads, intuition, messages from the gods, from the goddesses, from the universe, whatever that particular community believed, because that time was so open. And now, thanks to a little bit of study in Western medicine, we do know that actually when women are menstruating, the synapses are firing between the left and the right hemispheres very much. We do know that the gut has as many brain cells as a cat, and that those signals go up into our brain, and that gut instinct is a real thing, and those floodgates are very open during our menstrual phase. So instead of trying to repress and shove it down and pretend it's not happening and drug it and eliminate it, when we embrace it, we actually have this magical opportunity to get really clear, to think logically and creatively, to be inspired, to bring back messages for ourselves, for our families, for our loved ones, for our communities, for our businesses. And as you said, once upon a time, that was actually one of the things that was revered about women and was
Mm-hmm.
expected and honored. And
Right.
we've lost that in the repression, but I would love to see that make a big comeback.
Well, the thing is, too, is nowadays, a woman has her period and she's expected to go on like nothing's wrong. She's
Yeah,
expected to be at
exactly.
work. She's expected to, you know, do what she's
Hmm.
supposed to do. I mean, we still tend to the children. You,
Yeah.
you, you still go to work. It doesn't matter.
Hmm.
If you call into work and you say, I'm not coming in because I've got my period, they're going to laugh at you. They're going to be like,
Yeah.
really? And,
Hmm.
it's something that we're just expected to do. So what? You have your period. Go on,
Right. And that's
put on
not
your
how
big
we
girl
evolved.
panties.
Right. And that's not how we evolved. As human beings, we evolved with our communities, with our support. And that saying, it takes a village, was very true because everything took a village.
Mm-hmm.
Planting the food, getting the crops, preserving the bounty, all of that, hunting, gathering, everything. It was all a village, and that included menstruating and having the time of rest and peace to do nothing but channel those divine inspirations and to take care of ourselves and to have the community take care of us in turn. And we don't do that anymore. And much like our diet and our environment, we've been in this place where now we're expected to just work through it and be one of the boys and all of these things, when that's not how we evolved. And our body is, of course, going, no, 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 this is not what we do now. This isn't right. And in an evolutionary standpoint, the Industrial Revolution is such a small blink of time in our evolution, and our bodies just have not been able to adapt or deal with it. So we're in this place where we're trying to do something that we're just not set up to do. All that to say that you don't have to spend those, 3 to 7 days doing absolutely nothing, but they're actually some of the most productive times for a woman in her cycle, actually. But it's a different kind of productivity, and sitting in an office and, going to the gym and doing these same things day in and day out is not productive. In fact, it can be very inflammatory and very bad for our hormones in our bodies.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the inflammation with the food and the diet.
Yeah. So as I said, we didn't evolve the eating processed foods, and our body doesn't recognize it. And most disease, the root of it is inflammation. Something
Right.
is not reacting well for you, for your body. And it's different for different people. Big ones are things like gluten, soy, dairy, eggs. But and it's not usually all of them for everybody. Generally, there's one or two that are really big for an individual, and eliminating those can make vast leaps of improvement in a person's body, however it's showing up. So when we're eating with our cycles and we're choosing foods that nourish our hormones in each phase of our cycle, we can actually reduce the inflammation in our body. Our body has a very cyclical detoxification and nourishment pattern. And our cycle and our food kind of go in almost opposites, where we're really deeply nourishing our body just before our body does its menstrual detoxification. And then as we're coming out of our menstrual detoxification, our body is ready to nourish, and we're eating very detoxifying foods because we're strong again. We're ready to be nourished. We're ready to cleanse out the organs that weren't busy being cleansed during the menstrual phase. And then we can kind of move through these cycles where we're constantly detoxifying and nourishing our body at the same time. And it really makes this amazing improvement in the amount of inflammation in our body, which reduces a lot of those symptoms, those mood swings, those cramps, those sore boobs,
Mm-hmm.
bloating, digestive issues, the brain fog, the fatigue, the fuzziness. All of those things can really be reduced just in some small to large, depending on how drastic your symptoms are, dietary changes. I know for me, I had to make a few drastic dietary changes. but well worth it. And I don't have those symptoms anymore. So I am super happy to pass by the gluten when it comes around, just knowing that I'm not going to have that horrific experience next month when I get my period. It's going to be a much more pleasant and inspirational process. So for me, it's a very happy trade-off. I'm very happy to do that trade-off. For others, that might be an extreme trade-off, and it might be unnecessary. It might be something else. So it's definitely part of that discovery method.
Right. I know for me, when I had my cycle, it was like I always knew it was coming because the week before I would be so hungry. And that was the thing too, when you were talking about, avoiding certain foods. It was like at that point in time, I wasn't looking to avoid anything because I was having cravings. I was craving this and I was craving that. So,
Yeah.
but like you were saying, for someone it's different. But I did, start learning that there were some foods like what you were mentioning. For me, it's dairy. Dairy causes inflammation for me, so I have to pay
Yeah, that's
attention
a
to
big
how
one.
much dairy I am consuming.
Yeah.
What are some of the foods that you would recommend that people try to consciously eat before they have their menstrual cycle?
Oh, yeah, that's an excellent question, especially because that's that time where, like you said, it's hard to say no to anything because you just want to consume everything. And the reason for that is your body is desperately begging you for the nourishment it needs to have a healthy period, except that our body is programmed to desire things like sugar and fat because in nature, they're hard to find. So we really crave, donuts before our menstrual cycle because it's sugar and it's fat and it's those things that we really need in extreme doses, except that it's not real because it's not healthy fat for certain, and it's certainly not healthy sugars either. So we go into these cravings for these real extremes because we're not getting the proper nourishment we need. So one of the things that I recommend is really setting yourself up for success. And I recommend this whether you're talking about food, whether you're talking about business, working out, it doesn't matter. Whatever you do, when you set yourself up for success, your odds are so much better that you will make better choices. And one of the things I love, especially in that little phase, is to know what your cravings are and then surround yourself with healthy alternatives to that. So for me, it was definitely chocolate and salty chocolate. That was like a real big one for me.
Yeah, me too.
And I think that's pretty common. And that's your body asking for magnesium. That's your body asking for hydration and electrolytes. Salt is that hydration aspect. It's your body asking for fat, especially if it's like ice cream cravings or, fatty, the donuts or fat cravings. So for me, I started doing things like making myself a big container, like a ball jar of chocolate chia seed pudding with whole fat coconut milk, even coconut cream, if that's what's around and I have my hands on it, or a whole fat. If dairy is not a problem for you, I really enjoy things like whole fat raw creams, something that's really just very fatty and really good for you, really rich. I love coconut milk, and I don't really have problems with dairy, but I always do it because right before the bleed, even for somebody who doesn't have dairy problems, it can still cause problems. So for me, I particularly like to focus on the coconut milks, the full fat things, and then lots of really good raw cacao in there, chia seeds, and making a really rich chia seed pudding. And I like to put cinnamon and vanilla and maybe a little nutmeg in there and a sprinkle of salt, just to give me that chocolatey, salty feeling. And those chia seeds are really good for your body because it helps to pull out the excess hormones your body's been producing, which can cause so many of those PMS and painful period symptoms. So it's one of those foods that's almost like a perfect superfood for a woman the week before she's about to have her bleed. It's got that nice magnesium from the chocolate, that fat, that salt, all of those things that you're kind of craving. And then other things like brassica veggies. I love to have cauliflower pizza crust I'll make myself a couple of them at a time and then just keep them in the freezer so that when I have my luteal phase, I have a frozen pizza on hand that's actually going to help my body get rid of the excess hormones, because those brassica veggies, those cooked brassicas, not the raw, but the cooked brassicas, like cauliflower and broccoli, actually help pull out those excess hormones as well. So I can get that pizza craving in, but also know that as I'm eating that pizza, it's actually helping set myself up for a happy, healthy period. So there's a few of these little tricks that I think are just so very powerful. Another one is buckwheat. This is another one of my really top tippy-toppy favorites, because it's a seed, it's gluten-free, it's a protein-rich, fiber-rich seed, and again, that fiber to get rid of those excess hormones in the body. And that protein, because you're just craving it, is another really good one. And there's a few different ways. I have a fermented bread recipe on my website that's really easy to make. But there's also, you can make it like oatmeal in the morning. You can make it like rice. It's a little stickier than rice is, but you can make it like rice. It's got a lot of flexibility to it, and it's just and it satisfies that carbs craving that we get. And then the other thing is that I really recommend for women is things like oysters that have a lot of zinc, liver, those really nutrient-dense foods that traditionally were saved for women when they were bleeding in cultures all around the world. So the seafaring cultures that didn't have land animals generally gave women a combination of a seafood broth made from the shells and the powders of the shells, so that real rich, nutrient-dense, which is the same thing as bone broth for our land-locked brethren. And then we've also got the bone broths and the livers, because those were such zinc-rich, protein, iron, mineral-rich foods, and those are exactly what women needed to have a very healthy, happy period. And those take a little bit of time for the body to build up. And one of the processes that happens in a woman's body is the ovulation phase. And if the ovulation is healthy, oftentimes that will help make a healthier period. The ovulation requires zinc. And that's one of those things that you kind of need to be aware and consuming on a regular basis, not going crazy, but just a little bit, even a few oysters a month can make a drastic difference in the health of a woman's overall menstrual cycle, from ovulation to PMS to menstruation. So those really nutrient-dense foods are hugely helpful for women.
Thank you for that. That was very informative. I actually just learned something. A lot of things I didn't know. So let's talk about unexpected period problems that some women might happen across.
Yeah. So one thing when I got started was I started with hormonal balance. I was a professional dancer. I taught yoga and Pilates and all of these things, and I was having my period problems. And it's hard to make money when your body is shutting down for 3 days every month, and your job is on your feet working out, dancing or bartending or teaching yoga classes or Pilates classes or belly bar classes or whatever. So I kind of had this moment where I was like, I need a job that I can actually sit down, or that I can still make money when I'm not at my peak physical condition. And so I started health coaching. I went to school to get my health coaching certification, became a holistic health coach. And I started working with women, a lot of athletes, because I taught some really hard classes. So I had a lot of athletes in my classes, and they would ask me for, healthy recipes and these kinds of things. And I quickly realized they all had period problems, but they were showing up in different ways. They were showing up in like acne, which we don't always associate with our hormones. It was showing up in lackluster hair or weak nails, which we don't often associate with the hormonal imbalance. It was showing up in fatigue, having to sleep really long hours, needing desperately to take naps, which is not necessarily a bad thing during your cycle. Even the most hormonally balanced woman will still want to have a nap from time to time, and that's totally okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But I'm talking like you're standing there trying to function and you can't, because you cannot get your brain to turn on. Those brain fog moments when you're staring at a computer screen going, I know how to do this. I do this every day. Why can't I make this happen? Those very frustrated feelings. And then as my business progressed and I started working with more and more women who own their own businesses, I started realizing things like being very unsatisfied with your life, with your business. We're coming in phases for my clients. So I would see them the week before their cycles, and they'd be like, you know what, I think my business name is terrible. I should probably start all over. Or my branding colors are horrific. I need to start all over. Or I just hate everything about my website. I think I'm just going to delete it and start from scratch. Or all of these throwing the baby out with the bathwater kind of reactions. And we were seeing that they were coming up at the same time every month. And I was going, this is how your PMS is manifesting. You're not getting the sore boobs or the bloating or the cramps. You're getting the desire to just want to walk out of your house and not look back. Leave your husband and your kids and take off into the sunset. Like, it's just feelings of everything is just a disaster or nothing is okay. And these very drastic feelings, which we don't often say out loud. We usually mask them with something like, I just am not good at this, or we put ourselves down instead of seeing them from that perspective. But when working with so many women, I realized that common thread of just really the voices in your head, the gremlins, the negative woman yelling at you in your head is just getting too loud. And that's a very, very common, but very much ignored and not spoken about because it shows weakness. It shows that you're not strong enough, right? Even though that's not true.
Right.
But that's how it feels to us. So it's a very common, but a very untalked about sign of a hormonal imbalance. And I believe it's something we should very much be talking about. Just acknowledging that it's so common amongst women would make us all feel a heck of a lot better. And it'd be a lot easier to ignore that voice if we knew the women sitting next to us have that same problem.
Right.
And we're all in it together. And we could actually help each other out. It would make for a much more pleasant experience. And it'd be a lot easier to ignore that voice and go, you know what, I'm going to work on my hormonal balance. I'm going to fix this.
You know, the funny thing about that is that when you start becoming menopausal, it gets worse. Those thoughts get worse. They're horrible.
Yeah, those hormones go into crazy reactions.
Oh,
and
it was terrible when I started.
Yeah.
I mean, my thoughts are so irrational, and I knew they were rational, but my brain was trying to convince me that no, this is how it is. And I'm going, no, it's not. And my brain's going, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. You know?
Yeah, it's almost an out-of-body experience. You know it's happening, but you can't seem to stop it.
Right, totally. I totally agree. So let's talk about, you were talking about being a Pilates instructor and a yoga instructor. I want to talk about exercise, and I just want to say that, you know, one thing I had noticed when I had my period and I would exercise, even though I didn't feel like it, I would force myself to, I noticed that my cramps subsided. And I had wondered why, and I did some research, and I found out that exercising triggers the hormone dopamine, which is very similar, like morphine, to our bodies. So I was like, wow, that's crazy. But anyway, talk more about exercise.
Oh, yeah. You know, it's funny. I see it. I exercise, especially when you have cramps, it goes one of two ways for women. It either makes it way better or way worse. It's amazing how very little in between there seems to be for women on that one. And I kind of like it because it's a really clear, easy to answer question that you can do for yourself. Does forcing myself to get up and move help feel better for me, or does it feel worse for me? And you can try it and go, nope, that feels worse, and go lay down. Or you can be like, yes, this feels better, and feel better. So I kind of like that one because it's such an easy answer. But something that that I learned early on in my career, because I was working with professional athletes and was a professional athlete, that we have different reactions to working out than our male counterparts do, partially because, again, how we evolved with men were the hunters and we were the gatherers and that kind of thing. But we cardio specifically, those very high level things trigger our stress response. So for women, that can actually be negative because so many of us have already heightened stress responses. We're already so stressed out all of the time that adding more stress can actually make our hormonal imbalances worse. So for some women, that intense exercise can actually be a contributing factor to any of the period problems that are out there, from endometriosis to PCOS to excess of bleeding, dysmenorrhea, all of these things. Even just PMS, PMDD, the more drastic mood disorders. So sometimes it can be really helpful, and sometimes it can be a really bad idea. And that's where it's, listen to your body and give it what it needs, for sure. But I've found, working with my clients, that something that seems to be very consistent and very effective is to work out with our cycles. So doing things like those harder, more intense group-oriented classes during the follicular and ovulation phases of the cycle, and then doing those more relaxed, yin yoga, a gentle stretching class, maybe segueing from, those boot camp classes to a Pilates class to a yin yoga class throughout your cycle, so that you're actually giving your body that heightened workout when you have the excess energy, your testosterone is high, your body is more adaptable and responsive. And then as you come into that more internal time, letting yourself stretch and sit in poses longer and just feel your body in this place and letting it open and relax, encouraging that relaxation state, especially in the week before and the first few days of the cycle, just really being able to do that stretching and relaxing. And then overall, I saw far more results in my clients who did things like weight training instead of cardio, for actually kickstarting our metabolism, for helping our digestive tract work better, for working on those core muscles and helping get nice, strong core muscles, and then using that time in the late luteal menstrual phase, that time right before your period and during your period, to work on the flexibility, so that you're not just building strength and tightening your body, but so that you're also building strength and opening your body, which is, our secret power as women is being very open and being receptive and being loose, but also having that strength to back it up. And I found a lot of really good effects for myself and clients doing that nice balance of the two. So when we're talking about exercise in women, I really, really encourage women to feel their bodies, to see what it is, to know when pushing is a good idea and when pushing it is a terrible idea, and to say that, and to be okay with it and not feel like a failure, because you're not a failure. You'll be right back there again doing it in another week or two. It's just not the time, and that's okay.
Now, for some people who might not know what the core is, can you explain what the core is
Oh,
of the body?
yeah. Absolutely. Great question. Thank you. It's the muscles that surround your center of gravity. So for women, this is low. It's between your pelvic bones. So right where your uterus sits, between the belly button and your pelvic floor. So between your pelvis and your belly button there. That is your very low center of gravity for women, right, in our hips. Men's is a little higher. Men's a little more closer to their waist. So for women, it's our hips, and it's those abdominal muscles, those side muscles that go down, our lower back muscles, and our hips and thighs. So core, when most people refer to core, they're usually talking about having a six-pack abs. I think of it more as basically from your knees to your belly button. This is really your powerhouse, especially for women, because that is where our strongest muscles are. Right. That's more of our powerhouse, and that pelvic floor is right in the center of that. And for women, having a strong pelvic floor is very, very important, and especially for women who've given birth, but also for every woman. And most women don't realize this, but your pelvic floor is what supports not only your uterus and having a good, healthy period, because having a healthy pelvic floor means your uterus is supported, your ovaries, your whole system, your reproductive system is supported, but also incontinence, the sneezing and peeing a little bit, those kinds of things, especially for women who've given birth. That's all your pelvic floor. And for women, strengthening your pelvic floor means doing two things. It means doing some squats, which don't have to be butt to the floor squats, but just keeping your heels on the floor, and keeping your knees from going in front of your toes. So just going as far down as you can from standing with your feet about hip distance apart without lifting your heels and without pushing your knees over your toes. So just a few of those throughout the day can make a huge impact on your pelvic floor. And I do this like walking the dog while my dog is deciding which particular plant to pee on. I'll do some squats. Or when I'm waiting for the water to boil, the kettle to boil in the morning, or while I'm waiting for dinner to finish at night. There's the little places where I'll just go, 5 squats and just do them. And the other thing is internal muscle systems. Kegels is a very popular one. I personally am a bigger fan of using a yoni egg, doing yoni egg work. But you have to be, you have to actually have some guidance for that, because that knowledge has fallen so far out of our community knowledge. All women used to know how to do the yoni egg, how to work all of these things, and we don't have that collective knowledge anymore. So that one I do advise doing some research, talking to somebody, making sure you're getting a really quality stone. But that internal work is what actually helps the vaginal canal stay moist, especially through perimenopause and menopause, but stay moist, stay into a balanced ecosystem, stay flexible and strong. And again, we're talking about that same system of the body where strength is good, but flexibility is necessary as well, because when you're strong but not flexible, you're just tight. And that's not good either. I know we kind of have this, women are supposed to be virginal tight, and that's what's going to satisfy our men, but that's not healthy for women. The husband stitch after having given birth and being ripped is not good for women and for our vaginal, our health, our body health, our mental health, none of that. So actually having a vaginal canal that's strong but also flexible, and that yoni egg work does do that. So you need both to have a really strong pelvic floor. And I always say start with squats, because you can do them now. You don't need any special equipment. And then go and look into yoni eggs and see what it's like, and be brave and just give it a try and see how it feels and see how it works. And you'll see improvements. And I got to tell you, moving into perimenopause and menopause is huge to keep a healthy vaginal canal and keep your juiciness and your luxuriousness.
Right. Well, and the thing is, too, is when I was going through it and I was looking at the research, and that's something else that's not talked about, is the vaginal dryness. When women are going through that, and I had actually written a blog about it, and somebody thanked me because nobody else is talking about it. And we need to keep that moisture down there, too, because it helps to push out any dead cells. It's very healthy for the body. So being that I'm at that point in time, I'm going to ask you, now, do squats help with the moisture? Or is it just that
Not
egg?
Not with moisture. It's just with the pelvic floor strengthening, and the incontinence and that sort of thing.
So I'm going to ask
bladder control.
So I'm going to ask the question, because I'm sure other women are out there dealing with it just like I am. What can we do to increase that moisture outside of that egg? Is there anything else?
Yes, there's absolutely masturbation. Just spending some time with yourself and getting your juices flowing.
Now, being sexually active, is that different?
No, that's not different. Just so long as, and I'm qualifying this, it's satisfying for you.
Okay.
Because partnered play is perfectly fine as long as it's not for the satisfaction of your partner, but for the satisfaction of yourself, and enjoying that time and allowing those juices to flow pre-penetration, if that is a part of it. And it doesn't have to be. We have such a linear thought. What we think about sex in the Western world is for men. It's having sex until you orgasm, and that's the point of sex for Western society. But that's not really the point. And sometimes it's just for the fun of revving the engine and not actually having an orgasm. And sometimes it is. But and for women, we have so many different kinds of orgasms. There's so many pleasure points. There's clitoral. There's 4 different acupressure points that we know of in the vaginal canal. The G spot's the most popular, but there's actually other ones. There's combinations. There's so many kinds of orgasms that women don't even know exist. So really, if you're doing partnered play, have fun. Let there be other outcomes and goals in it. And as long as your engine is running and your juices are flowing, then that is a good part of keeping a healthy vaginal canal in ecosystem.
Now, one of the things when I was doing the research, they were saying vitamin E.
Yeah, those fat-soluble vitamins, the D's and the E's, and those good vitamins are absolutely very good. Also, making sure you're hydrated, and I'll see this even in women in menstrual cycles and as outside of sex, just having no cervical fluid throughout their menstrual cycle because they're just so dehydrated. And you're supposed to have cervical fluid outside of just menstruation. So making sure you're hydrated, and that can mean drinking more water. It could mean throwing in a coconut water into your daily routine, or cucumber juice, or a cucumber celery parsley juice, getting some lemon water in. Even having a little sprinkle of salt in your water can make a difference in helping to hydrate yourself. And again, chia seeds are actually very good for hydration because of their aloe gel consistency can actually help balance your electrolytes. So,
What was it that you just said?
Chia seeds.
Oh, chia seeds. Okay. Yeah, I do those.
Yeah,
I do those like on a daily basis, just about.
Yeah. And that's really good for keeping a nice, hydrated, electrolyte balanced body.
I didn't know
Just throwing
that.
a spoonful of chia seeds in your water bottle once a day.
I didn't know that. I've been eating them because they're high in omega and the omegas.
Yeah. They're great. They're great little superfoods.
Yeah, and a good source for energy. And I mean, I sprinkle them just about anything. If I have a wrap, I sprinkle them in my wrap. I sprinkle them in my soup. If I make egg salad,
Nice.
mashed potatoes,
Yeah.
eggs,
Yeah.
it's like I put chia. Like I said, I have chia seeds just about every single day. So I didn't know that
Perfect.
about them.
That's great.
I want to go back
Yeah.
to that egg. Could you spell the first word in that?
Yeah, you'll see them called yoni eggs, YONI, or you'll see jade egg, the jade egg. There's more than jade out there, though jade is the most popular and it's a great one to start with. But you do have to make sure it's real jade, and you have to make sure you're buying from a company that's not using fillers, because that will be a negative effect on your vaginal ecosystem. Those fillers. So you have to make sure it's meant for internal use and that it's coming from a reputable supplier that doesn't use fillers or anything in it, and that they're, I buy from a company that gets certified by the Gemological Institute. So you look for things like third-party verification, look for, these kinds of things in it, and starting with a jade egg is a perfect place to start. And there's other kinds, like I said, but it's a good place to start. It's the traditional place to start as well.
Do you sell the eggs on your website?
I don't do it regularly. I do in my communities. We do a group order, usually once a year or more if there's a lot of demand for it. We have had years where we did it like 3 orders in 1 year just based on the demand. And we do a wholesale order. So I actually get a very high quality supply, and we all order, and then they're handmade. So one of the things is it takes time from the people I order from. So it's not as instantly gratifying and supplying, but it's very good, high quality, and I really like them, but they only sell wholesale. So that's why but they have so many different varieties that's why we decided to go with this bulk order and kind of use our power of numbers. If all of us get together and we all decide we want to order together, and then I just place the order so we get the wholesale price and then distribute out, and it's actually quite a lot of fun to do as well. But there are definitely places that you can buy right now today just one egg from that would be a great place. Just look for those hallmarks. And it depends on where you are in the world, too. I mean, I know suppliers in different parts of the world, but they don't all ship everywhere. And sometimes the shipping is just outrageously expensive to go from one place
Right.
to the other.
Right.
So
Exactly. That's good to know. I've never heard of that, so I'm gonna be looking into that. So
yeah, they're phenomenal.
let's talk about the four phases of the cycle in the positive.
Yeah, great question. So there's definitely different models out there. I follow the 4 seasons model. It makes the most sense to me. I think that when you look at old traditions like Ayurvedic traditions and Chinese medicine traditions, they also base the menstrual cycle with the seasons, the 4 seasons. And sometimes they'll talk about it from a 5 season perspective, like late summer, late summer, and fall. I just kind of put late summer and fall together because I think we have that 4 season model in our minds. But we as women are comfortable with transitions, so I'm not too terribly worried about that. So I follow the 4 season model. You have the easiest one to know is menstruation. That's your menstrual phase. It's very clear what that phase is because it's when you aren't bleeding. So it's a very easy one to know when it's happening. And it's also considered our winter phase. So this is the time when we are most internal. It's that yin time. So there's yin and yang energies. It's the most yin time. It's that internal time. It's the introvert time. And it's also the water phase. So when we think about the menstrual phase, it's very clearly that heavy, watery, winter internal time. And this is also partially because the estrogen and the progesterone that's in your body dips right before you get your bleed. And this is one of the things that triggers your menstrual phase. So all of these things drop, and then you end up into your menstrual phase. As I said earlier, I think one of the most amazing parts about this phase is just how very in tune you are to the bigger picture, to being able to see creatively and logically at the same time. We're very good at answering why questions. Why are things happening like this? And the phase right before this, we're really in a what phase. We talk a lot about what's going on in our bodies, or what's annoying us, or what's negative. And in this menstrual phase, we're really good at going, well, why is it bothering me? Why is something, why is this affecting me this way? Why? So we're really good at answering those why questions. And for women in relationships, one of the perks of that is that you can really suss out some of the issues that you may be having in your relationship, some of those problems, because you can really sit down and think about, why is this bothering me, or why is this a problem? And for my business women, my women who are CEOs, who are making decisions or running their own businesses or in a management position in a job, it's a really great time to look at those systems and, why am I doing this? Why is this working? Why is this not working? That kind of thing. So we have a really amazing superpower during this time. We can really get into the root and heart of a problem and even come up with some creative ideas and solutions to deal with it that we just don't have the access to necessarily in the other phases of the cycle. So it's a really very cool spot to be in if we can, like I said, stop running away from it and actually maybe run towards it a little bit. But after the menstrual phase, we go into the follicular phase, and this is our springtime. It's wood element, wood energy. Our young energy is starting to rise. We're really into an outer focus during the phase. We're looking more out of our own bodies, and we're much more group oriented. We want to go hang out with our girls, go to happy hour, do that group class, try that new painting class, whatever. We're just much more in tune with trying new things during that phase. And it's a really good phase to do that kind of stuff. So that kind of power in that phase is our power of persuasion, our power of doing things, our power of creativity, getting there and really getting into the how questions. How does this work? How is this problem best solved? How is how will my partner best hear me in this situation? You know, you might know what the problem is. Now, how do you talk to your partner? And during this phase, it's a really good time to go, how does my partner best hear me? You know, how is it best for me to talk to my employees? How is it best for me to solve these problems? So we've got this really great superpower in that phase. And as we move from follicular, we move into our ovulation phase, which studies have shown that during ovulation, women make more money. So they did a study on women in six positions and found out, that they make the most money in their late follicular and their ovulation phase. Our faces become more symmetrical during ovulation because this is when we're fertile. So our faces become more symmetrical. Our pheromones give off this just give me whatever I ask for kind of vibe. And we actually are much more likely to get the things that we want. So it's a really good time to ask for that raise, to ask your partner for the help, for the extra thing. It's a good time to have that communication, to do those things, because people are much more in tune with you and want to help you in that phase. So why not capitalize on that time? And you're also at the height of your young energy, your external, extroverted energy. So it's a really good time to go out and do those things. That being said, I do want to say, if you are a woman who is on ovulation and has ovulation pain or has that opposite reaction, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not doing it wrong. And it may be a hormonal imbalance. It may not be. Some women do have that opposite reaction, though the vast majority have that more external feeling. Some women do have an opposite, and I don't want anyone to feel discluded if that's not how they feel, or if they have ovulation pain or something and are not feeling that same way. It can happen, and there's nothing per se wrong with you, though. If you're having ovulation pain, please go to your doctor and make sure that there's nothing wrong, because there could be cysts or fibroids on your ovaries, and that could be part of the problem.
Let me ask you something.
Then,
When does a woman know when they're ovulating? This is really weird for me to ask, but I never knew when I was ovulating, and my cycle was never consistent.
Yeah, there's a couple ways that you can know when you're ovulating, and I'm a fan of the best 2 out of 3 methods. So the three most reliable methods of knowing when you're ovulating are your cervical fluid. Women's cervical fluid turns into something that looks like raw egg whites. It's usually the heaviest during the month outside of menstruation. You almost always have this moment of like sploosh, like I just released a lot of cervical fluid. And that's very often right at the beginning of your ovulation phase. That kind of is like the moment the egg is released. So that's the first one, and it's usually stretchy. So if you can usually stretch it between 2 fingers, a little bit like warm mozzarella cheese would stretch. It's true, and it's effective, and it works, and it's a great way of noticing. But like I said, some women who are very dehydrated won't have that reaction. So another way of knowing is your basal body temperature. So if you take your temperature every morning before you so much as even sit up, just roll over and take your temperature every morning at the same time, you will see a distinct spike of about a degree. It's a little less in Celsius because their degrees are bigger. But in Fahrenheit, it's about a degree. So, if you're normally around 97 degrees and then you ovulate, you'll wake up one morning and your basal body temperature will be like 97.9 or 98. Like it'll spike a few percentage points there. And the third way is your cervix. So you can feel your cervix in your body, and your cervix actually opens during ovulation. It opens during menstruation to release blood, and it opens during ovulation to allow sperm inside the uterus. So you can feel your cervix, and it will open during ovulation. So I'm a kind of a fan of, you can do all 3, and if you're trying to get pregnant or you're using the fertility awareness method to not get pregnant, you should do all 3. You should know for sure what's happening in your body every single day. If you're just doing it to track and be aware of your cycle and your body, then the best 2 out of 3 is my recommended option. So for most women, that means checking your cervical fluid daily and doing your basal body temperature, because it's less invasive than checking your cervix each day. But it is a very interesting practice.
A woman might not want to avoid getting pregnant, but she might want to know a good time to ask the boss for a raise.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and this is why I say, it's good to know, like, even if you just want to be aware of where you are in your cycle, simply noting your cervical fluid and your basal body temperature will tell you that you're ovulating. So, I myself don't always have that very clear cervical fluid, but I do have the clear temperature change every month. So being able to see at least one sign that will help you know where you are in your cycle can make a really big difference.
That's good to know. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, the last you were talking about in the 4 phases was spring.
Yes. So our final phase is the luteal phase. And this is a week to 2 weeks for women. So usually in the 28-day cycle that we're also familiar with, the menstrual phase is 5 to 7 days. The follicular phase is around 7 days. The ovulation phase is around 3 days. And that's the same for everyone. Ovulation is 3 to 4 days for every single woman because that's just simply how long an egg can be in existence. You can only get pregnant about 6 days out of the month. So our egg is only actually viable for about 3 to 4 days. And then lastly, we have the luteal phase. And this is where if you have a longer or shorter period, this is usually where you see the flexibility in your cycle. It's usually the luteal phase that gets a little bit longer or shorter. The follicular phase can as well, but it's usually the luteal phase. And this is where we see the two seasons, the late summer and the fall seasons. And usually women will feel a little dip post-ovulation from their energy levels, and that's just because our testosterone dips as we ovulate. And all of our hormones take a dip after our ovulation. And we feel a little like, oh, I could use a little bit of rest. And you tend to feel very high energy during the ovulation phase. So it's a nice little like recovery moment. And then we generally get a second wind during the luteal phase. And that's just because those hormones rise again to prepare for a fertile egg to be incubated. And when that doesn't happen, that's when our hormones dip again, and that signals menstruation. So in that luteal phase, we have this little mini dip, rise, dip of our hormones. And this is where we are in that fall energy. It's the earth energy. It's the metal energy. It's this time where we typically start to feel more yin. Again, we're starting towards that internal movement, that more inner work area. And that actually, it's actually really kind of a fantastic time if you're going with your cycle, because we're almost instinctually, we want to make lists. We want to nest. We want to redo the house. We want to do the pounds of laundry that we've been ignoring for the last couple of weeks because we've just been so busy getting everything done that we're just like, oh, my goodness, you know what? I kind of actually want to clean the kitchen today, or I kind of want to do the laundry today. And that's great. And this is one of those things that when you're living with your cycle and you're doing things in your cycle, you don't have to feel guilty about, letting the house go to crap for a couple of weeks during your follicular and ovulation phase because you're too busy living life and getting things done and knocking out amazing milestones. And then because you're coming around to your luteal phase and you know that you're not going to have as much energy, you're not going to want to do all of those things, and it will be the perfect time to deal with all of that laundry. And it's okay. It takes a lot of the guilt and a lot of the shame and a lot of the I should off your plate.
Right.
It makes life a lot easier to just live and enjoy. But in that luteal phase, we're very good at figuring out what is going on. So we're really good at knowing what's not working and what is working. So it's a great time to make those lists. What is working? What isn't working? What could be better? What could be, what am I grateful for? What would I like to see different? Those kinds of things. So it's a really good time to just stand back and observe. And if you can let go of the judgment and just observe, you can really set into motion your next month of making significant changes. And each cycle can turn into this really beautiful process of recognizing what's going on, what's working, what's not, moving into that why phase, figuring out why it's not working or why it is working and make it better. And then you can go into how phase. How should I fix this? How should I make it better? And then do that. And then go back into your luteal phase and start it again. And you can really just see each cycle and each month as being a way to improve relationships, employee relationships, significant other relationships, business relationships, and then as well as your work, your career, your business, your money earning, your money relationships, all of these things. And you can just up level everything month after month, cycle after cycle.
That's very interesting to know. You know, it never ceases to amaze me the things that we don't know about our bodies.
Yeah.
There's so
It is
much.
amazing.
Yeah. So with that
I'm
said,
sure in 20 years, I'm going to look back in time and be like, man, I knew so little then. We learned so much.
well, you know, I do a lot of research. I've listened to a lot of summits, and I listened to one. It was from a website called Health Talks Online, and all it dealt with was women's hormones. And I learned a lot from that, and I'm learning even more from this conversation. Go, whoa, I never even knew that. But with that,
Yeah, I'm always learning. I love it. That's
oh
one of the
yeah,
beautiful things about this field of work is that I will never not be learning new things. And I think that's fantastic.
well, and that's with me because primarily what my niche is natural living. So
Mm-hmm.
there's so much to learn out there about living naturally. So I'm always, you know, intrigued by any information that I could get in the realm of doing things naturally, the way things should
Mm-hmm.
be done, and passing that information on to, you know, my clients, my customers that
Yeah,
I come across.
absolutely.
So, what is a powerful period?
Well, this is where I think we will see some significant changes in the coming generations. And I hope that I live long enough to see the beginning of this. But when women are living with their cycles, instead of looking at it as a negative thing like, you're dragging me through this, I don't want to have to stop, I don't want to have to relax, I don't want to have to, and seeing it as a negative, it manifests as a negative. It is an inconvenience. It is painful. It is uncomfortable. It is whatever it is. But when we are shifting that concept and instead of trying to push our hormones down, you know, maybe taking birth control back to back or getting a shot or an IUD or something where we're eliminating our cycles, but actually starting to embrace them, to see them as a powerful ally, as a guide that you have built in. You know, we're always looking for these external guides. This guru who will teach me this, my spirit guide, my external guide, all of these outer things, when in reality we have a guide that is showing us each and every day how best to handle these situations, how best to move forward, how best to live your best life. And it's right there in our own body. And it's actually literally part of us. And when we turn around and we look at our period as a powerful ally, as a powerful guide, mentor, trainer, a helpmate, ideally you come out of that menstrual phase, and as you move into perimenopause, and I call it losing your training wheels. And now you've learned how to live a beautiful cyclical life, and you can start just flowing with the moon or flowing with the seasons and really start seeing those cycles, and you acknowledge and honor the times of rest and know that to rest is to be higher. Think about it like jumping off the ground. The more you condense that spring, the more you bend your knees, the higher you jump, the more that spring bounces into the air. So those times of rest can actually make our lives far more productive and go further, faster when we actually take those times to rest. And that's the knowledge that women have. That's the knowledge that periods have shown us throughout our entire evolution, that we've lost that respect for and that knowledge of. And we were the ones that were teaching the men and the children how to rest, how to prepare, how to set yourself up for success.
I'm still doing that. I'm still telling my husband, you have to rest. You have to
Yes,
rest.
and that's exactly it. We used to teach the tribe how to live in cyclical rhythm and harmony, except that we have separated ourselves. Well, we didn't separate ourselves. It was ripped from us. This knowledge was ripped from us as women. And now we're rediscovering it. Now more and more women are coming back home to it. And I do hope that I live long enough to see the tipping point where more women than not are actually embracing their cycle and seeing it as a positive, powerful ally instead of this horrific inconvenience and embarrassment.
I think you should change your name from the period coach to the period guru. Or the period
That's a good
guide.
one. Yeah, that's a good one too.
How about the period guru guide?
Nice. That could be the book.
Okay, let's talk about the shift. What's the shift all about?
So the shift is that mindset shift, and it's not easy to do. It's hard. It takes community. It takes people who will listen and honor you and see you and not judge you. And it takes a lot of talking to yourself. And for me, that meant doing a lot of things like writing on my mirror, putting Post-it notes everywhere. And I still do this to this day, putting Post-it notes up in places, reminders, these kinds of things. It's about shifting your mindset. And it's hard to do because we spent our entire lives indoctrinated into this very linear way of thinking, this very push way of thinking, this today is the only day that you have to get everything in the world done, so you have to get it all done today. Tomorrow does not exist, which is only true when it comes to having fun and living a real exciting life. Otherwise, work can wait.
Right. I agree.
Right? And shifting out of that mindset that being a woman is a negative, is a disadvantage, it is a disadvantage in our culture, but we're not going to change that by continuing to think of it as a disadvantage. It's time to think of it as an advantage. It's time to think of it as just as equal and powerful as being male, to think in circles instead of lines and squares, and to be able to really make that shift. So some of the things that I recommend for women, especially when they're working with me or in any of my programs, is to do things like write on your mirror, especially when you know you're going into a particularly self-deprecating phase of your cycle, like that luteal phase, that week to 2 weeks before your period, is to write things on your mirror, over your seat, on your office desk that say things like slowing down is not shameful, or slowing down will help me have a better, more productive business, or I am beautiful just as I am today. Anything, whatever that big voice in your head that's trying to take you down says, what's the positive opposite? And acknowledge it. Say thank you. I go through this every month just before I get my period. My body braces, very much like it's expecting the worst, like a PTSD kind of reaction, where my whole body clenches and braces and gets ready for this impending storm, and tightens and seizes and gets negative and stressed and hard and cold, and it's getting ready for a very violent, painful reaction, because that's what we experienced for 20 years. So I still, to this day, even though I've had much more pleasant periods for the last 10 years, just about, maybe not quite 10 years, but we're getting close. But I'm getting to this place where I've had at least a few years now of good periods, and I still have to remind myself, this is going to be a good period. You do not have to brace for the storm. It is safe to relax. It is safe to be open, to release. It is safe to bleed. It doesn't have to be a painful experience. And I just talk myself through it. Thank you for being prepared for the storm. Thank you for keeping me safe. Thank you for having those reactions that helped me protect myself, that helped me stay conscious, hanging off of the subway pole and getting myself home safely. Thank you for that, for fighting all of those years. But we don't have to do that anymore. We can actually be okay now. We are okay now. We're safe now. It doesn't have to be. So having that conversation with yourself, thank you for giving me that feeling of being less than, thank you for coming to me and saying, girl, you're fat. I hear you. I acknowledge you. I hear you when you say you can't even button those jeans anymore. I hear you. Thank you. You know what? You're right. I have expanded. I am about to bleed, and it's going to go away in a week. And it's okay to be in this moment right now. And you know what? I'm going to go have a good big glass of water. I'm going to go have some of my chia seeds. I'm going to go do some of the things that will help my hormones feel better, that might reduce this bloating, that might make me feel better. And you know what? If it works, great. And if it doesn't, that's okay. We'll try again next month. And it really doesn't matter, because in another week, we'll be just fine. So just having those conversations and letting go of the fear and the guilt and the shame and the negativity, and just reminding yourself, so whatever it takes, whether it's putting the notes on the mirror or the stickies on the computer or the notes on the refrigerator or whatever it is, that just reinforce that you're perfect just as you are today. It's not going to be the same tomorrow. It's okay to relax. It's okay to release. It's okay to renew. It's a big detoxification process. You know, what else can you get rid of in this moment? What else can you detoxify mentally, emotionally? What can you let go of? And letting those things go. And that shift, that mindset shift over time starts to really help you come out. And that alone can help reduce those symptoms. That alone can help balance your hormones. So doing those kinds of things, especially if you're doing it in conjunction with some dietary changes or some movement changes, can really help make that shift for yourself internally. And that ripples out to your family, to your loved ones, because they see you feeling better. And they see you loving more. They see you being gentle and more nourishing to themselves. They see you less anxious and stressed out and hateful against your own body or your own self. And they'll see that. And whether it's conscious or not, your whole family will relax with you. Women are the anchors of their families. If you relax, everyone else relax. If you're stressed and anxious and hate yourself, everyone else will too. So the more you can let go of that negativity and that hate of your own cycle and your own body, the more your whole family can, which will ripple out. And it just ripples out to your circles, your friends, your colleagues, the whole. And eventually, if we can all do this as a team, we can make this shift for all of the women in the rest of the world as well.
That would be awesome.
It is my plan to take over the world.
There you go. And I'm sure there's a lot of women that would go ahead and join you.
We're taking over the world, one woman at a time.
Stasha, it has been a pleasure having you on the show. You have been very informative. Where can people get in touch with you? Well, what are some of the services that you want to let people know that you offer?
Oh, well, the best thing is to go to periodcoach.com. My current projects are always there on the front page. There's always some kind of free workshop happening. All of the time, there's a free mandala that you can color for charting your cycle. It's beautiful. It's fun. We come up with a little slightly different one each year, so you can even collect them. And they're always free, so you can always be aware of what's happening in your body and in your cycle with that chart forever for free on my site. And then I also have a Facebook group, which is called the Red Circle Lady Business. And that's free to any woman who would like to join and learn more about her cycles, hormonal balance, spirituality, movement, all of these topics. I mean, we talk about it all in that circle. And it's a great place to share, to get ideas, to exchange ideas, to just feel supported, even if it's just to go in and go, guys, I had the worst cramps today. I just need some love. And everyone in that group will turn around and give you amazing love. So it's just a great place to go. It's safe space to go and be supported and have that community. And of course, my Facebook page is facebook.com/Stasha Washburn, and all sorts of good stuff is happening there. I'm not sure when this interview will come out, but I've got a free summit coming out in October, and I have a new book that I'm going to be doing a Kickstarter launch for at the end of October as well. So